Welcome to An Aries and Pisces Walk Into a Coffee Shop, the podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Bridget, she, her.
And I'm Tiffany, she, her. This is a podcast where two friends let go of perfectionism and talk unedited. Hello.
Hello. It's a pleasure to see you today.
Yes, I needed to see your face and hear your voice.
Yes.
And watch your mouth do that.
What did my mouth do?
Your mouth perfectly expressed the discombobulation and frustration I am feeling about the clip season.
Wow. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that and be like,
Yeah.
What did my mouth do? I'm over here taking off my slippers and my socks because it's getting very warm in here. The sun came back today and it gets very warm in this office, and I can't have the windows open because the children at the daycare next door are screaming outside.
Right. You also have a daycare next door.
Yeah.
I have what they call a children's play place. It's a daycare, but it's huge. I mean, it's big. And when the weather gets nice, they let all them little rascals out in the open. And it sounds like a pack of hyenas, a couple packs of hyenas going after each other. You know the scene in The Lion King? Kind of like that.
Yeah, I'll never understand it.
It doesn't sound joyous, but they must be having fun.
No, I don't know. I don't know. And I worked at a daycare for 5 years.
I always forget that was a thing you did.
But I feel like our kids never screamed like this. I don't feel like they were allowed to just be screaming in this fashion.
Yeah, I think my childhood was also different. I don't think I think that this is a newer thing where they're like, you know what? Go ahead, let out the primal scream. Whatever keeps you on an even keel when you're indoors. And I kind of get it, and I'm kind of for it, but my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
As we're saying all this, I'm thinking I have been practicing that.
The primal scream.
Yeah. And just letting it out. And whether I'm screaming into a pillow, which I'm pretty sure that was something that you had recommended to me a while ago. And then in the car the other day, I was sitting in my car. I'm pretty sure I was just parked in my driveway. But I was like, okay, I've been screaming into a pillow and that feels a certain way. What would it feel like to just scream out loud? And like you said the other day in that breathwork session, children throw tantrums all the time. They don't ask for permission. They don't care. They just do it. And I was like, what if I just let it out like that? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to use it as a breath exercise. I'm going to breathe in a really deep inhale. And then I'm just going to let it out as long and as much as I can. And that was magical. It felt just fantastic.
Yep. That's how my screaming practice started. I was in my car driving and I got so overwhelmed that it literally just tore out of me. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was actually really scary because I couldn't stop once I started and I didn't know that I had started. It was just happening to me. And then afterwards I was like, oh, this is what people talk about. I get it now. And so then I started making it a conscious thing where on my drives, I would go and drive and allow that to happen where it wasn't taking me over. And then I would find some just more private areas to park. So I didn't have to so then I could cry about it too. And so that's how the screaming started, was just out loud in my car, just looking at the open air, but in the safe confines of my little structure. with some modicum of privacy that affords. And then the screaming practice felt so important to me that I didn't always want to have to leave my house to do it, which is why the pillow thing started, because I've always rented and lived in apartments. And so, like, you could really hear a scream if you let
Yeah.
loose. In fact, sometimes I get a little self conscious because I'm like, I wonder if they could still hear this, because sometimes I really go for it. And I don't drive as much now, which I both like, but also doesn't allow for a lot of open air screaming. But it does add a certain, it's like what I imagine runners feel when they kind of like exhaust themselves a little bit. Like, people talk about a runner's high that I've never felt because I've never gotten there. But like, I imagine what I feel like after a really good scream sesh is what people are talking about when they say a runner's high.
Okay. Yeah. I know that runner's high. I am by no means a runner, but I have run. I think that at least you know some of my relationship with running. A I don't know what kind of word I want to use for it, like the relationship with me and running. But anyway,
Uh-huh.
I felt that, and now I'm thinking about that, like that scream. Like I was also thinking about it, like with like singing or like
Mm-hmm.
projecting your voice in that way. And I love singing,
Me too.
um, but like I don't feel like I have a fantastic singing voice. So I just heard some noise outside. Or is it next door? Who knows? It's always strange when you live in a building that's connected to other people next
Uh-huh.
door, and also it's run by someone else, so you never know when someone's going to show up and be doing something. Um, Bizarre. Anyway, what in the world is that? Can you hear that?
I thought I heard a little I heard a little noise, but I don't know what it
Hang on.
sounded like.
Hang on.
Okay.
Okay, so I was like, that sounds like it's inside my house. Like I have to
Mm-hmm.
go downstairs. Maybe Chloe is like fucking with the back door. Um, but she's just laying there.
Oh,
And
your baby.
I was like, what is this sound? And I was standing on the tile right in front of the back door,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounded like something was in my house, like, I don't know, digging around. I was like, what the fuck? So I went outside onto the deck, and I was like, yeah, somebody's like digging under my deck up against the house. And then
Oh my!
something like ran out. I can only assume it was a fucking groundhog.
I was about to
I
say,
didn't
is this the
I
groundhog
didn't see it, but
saga?
I was like, why are you back and now digging like up against my house? Like it's too stress. I can't handle it.
Yeah, the groundhogs have really been giving you a run for the money, literally and figuratively.
Yesterday I walked up the driveway. I have not been parking where I typically park my car
Yeah, you mentioned.
because of the groundhogs, and so I walked up there and I looked on the ground where I typically park, and I saw like a couple pieces of like my car wires
Oh
like
my
chewed
gosh.
up like on the ground. Like I was like, this is pieces of my car that are supposed to be attached to my car that are literally on, they
Mm-hmm.
chewed out pieces of my
Yes.
car.
Shaking fist is an appropriate response. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what were we talking about? Screaming at screaming at things. Oh,
You were talking
I
about
wanted to
singing.
yeah, I wanted to talk about singing. Um so I like singing, and a lot of times singing, like I feel lightheaded when I sing.
Mm.
And I have this a lot with like a lot of other things as well, like certain like breathing technique things, certain things in belly dance, like anything with like my upper body. Like I would get like lightheaded. I get
Mm-hmm.
lightheaded very easily in a lot of like situations like that, and singing is one of them. and I have like for a really long time wanted to take voice lessons to learn like how to breathe and how to do that with my voice without being lightheaded.
Right.
Um, because screaming does that as well, but it's not, I'm not screaming that often. So it's not like
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But I was just thinking the other day when I let out that really long scream like that I was like, I feel like I could get a similar kind of like cathartic feeling from if I was like just like singing like that, like very like powerfully like singing. And I thought
Yeah.
that that could be a fun thing maybe to explore or like to use as a like a tool.
Yes. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I didn't know that for most of my life I used singing to regulate my nervous system.
Mm.
And it didn't occur to me until I was fully adult and doing a lot of like throat chakra work that it like dawned on me one day of like, oh, you naturally were gravitating towards that as a practice because it was like I sang every day for most of my life. And I also feel really shy about it. And I used, like, when I was really young, I wanted to be a vocalist. I wanted to write songs. I like wanted to do that in a performance space. And I have sung in public a couple of times, but I never like quite got to that, like, oh, I'm a singer. I
Hmm.
perform singing. It felt too much. And I figured out why. It was because singing for me was a super vulnerable, really in my body way of regulating my
Mm.
nervous system, of using my voice when a lot of my life I didn't feel like I could use my voice and express
Hmm.
things. But if I was alone in my room listening to music a little loud and singing along, that was like the acceptable way to express emotions that I had no names for.
Hmm.
Um, and so then to bring that into like a performance space, petrifying.
Yeah.
My most vulnerable emotions coming
Yeah.
out of my mouth for other people to not only hear, but have to look at me doing it? No. And so when I see people doing that, I typically cry about it. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah. This just hits so hard for me. Like,
Yeah?
oh my God, yeah. Like, I'm like, exactly, yes, all of that. I always said that like music really got me through
Mm-hmm.
my childhood. That was like my escape. That was yeah, I could go in my room and turn up the music as loud as I could to try to drown everything else out. Um, but oh my God, my mind just went blank. Oh, I wanted to say that like yeah, I think hearing you say that like that was your emotional like regulation and the thought of
Mm-hmm.
being on a stage in front of people doing that. I wanted to do it so badly. But yeah, that's fucking terrifying and I think that that's why and I think it's also why I just feel so like enamored by singers, like by watching people perform in
Mm-hmm.
that way. And the whole time I am thinking, how are they doing that? Like, how are they just putting all of themselves out there? Like, I would just feel completely like petrified.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why for me, like, trumpet was so, like, playing trumpet was just, that was huge for me. And I realize now looking back, that was totally a way that I was able to, like, regulate myself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
throughout growing up that I didn't realize it, right? It's like controlled breath. It's artistic like
Ooh.
performance. It's and for me it was a like a barrier is not the right word, but it was like a maybe like a protective thing of like it's not me standing here using my voice, like it's me with a trumpet. Like and so I can perform like through the trumpet
Mm-hmm.
and that felt safer to me than just standing there just like me.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I hadn't considered that because I also played a wind instrument. I played flute for a lot of years. And I think that it was similar, but with this added layer of, so when I'm nervous or tense or emotional, I feel a lot of stuff in my throat. Like I get choked up a lot with a lot of different emotions. Most emotions will choke me up in one way or another. But playing an instrument and training that controlled breathing, it was a way to take up space and be loud and heard and not have to worry about my throat constricting. Because if my vocal cords were kind of like wavery, it didn't matter as long as I could rely on the training that I had done with the breath. And I hadn't thought about playing an instrument as breath work before, but now I'm like, oh, that was breath work.
Yeah.
Interesting. No wonder I miss playing the flute.
um, Flute was that was my second choice in fifth grade when we had to
Mm-hmm.
like pick our instruments. But I remember like blowing through the mouthpiece, and the flute is an instrument that I cannot play. That makes me feel lightheaded like instantly. But like I can play the trumpet. I think it has to do with like the mouthpiece and like the direction of the airflow, maybe.
Interesting.
But
I mean, it is a very different experience, so that would make sense.
yeah.
And I've never played trumpet, so I guess I don't have anything to compare it to, but I do remember having to practice a lot on that was fucking breath work. I didn't call it belly breath at the time, but now that I'm like casting my mind back, one of the problems that I had when I first started playing the flute is I would hyperventilate, is what was
Yeah.
happening. Because I was breathing in a lot, all right up into the top of my chest. Because especially when I started getting more into more complicated pieces of music, the notes go by really fast, and you had to learn how to like get in a lot of deep breath and then kind of hold and sustain it. You couldn't take a lot of inhales. And if you didn't learn how to do the deep breath, you were hyperventilating because you were like sipping in air to try to get through that piece of music. And I remember it being really difficult to learn how to like get the most air in and then control that coming back out in order to sustain those like long complicated pieces until you can breathe again, which is the same with singing. You have to learn how to get in enough air to get through a phrase without having to sip through certain choruses. Something I haven't mastered, but also something I haven't practiced enough. But that
I'm
makes sense with the lightheadedness for that reason.
yeah. Yeah. I'm finding this also fascinating to like after having not played for I mean, I don't know, over like 10 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um and now like looking back on it and going into it now with all of this body awareness that I do have and breathing awareness that I do have that I didn't have back when I was learning the trumpet. But yeah, they definitely talk about the like the belly breathing, the diaphragmatic, like that's the
Mm-hmm.
right, like that's the thing. But like it's wild to sit here now and like connect the dots. And I think it all happened for me when I was considering more about like I've been trying to focus on breathing into my belly more to like
Yeah.
regulate myself, my nervous system. And I was realizing that like, oh, I do my exhales very quickly, just as like a
Mm,
just regular ongoing breath. Like I let go of the breath very quickly. And so I was thinking like, okay, what are some ways that I can like practice extending my exhale? And I had been wanting to play trumpet again. I had been thinking about
mm,
taking lessons for a little while. And I thought about it again and I was like, holy shit, like that's an excellent way to extend your exhale just by like
yeah.
holding a note. And then that's when it hit me. I was like, holy shit. When I would say like, music got me through everything. Like the only thing about high school that I really liked was band. That's like the only
Yeah.
thing that like got me through. I wasn't joking. It like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how much of an impact it had on me. I didn't
Right.
know. I didn't even know what it was doing for me.
Yeah, you're just intuitively doing the things.
Whoa.
Uh-huh. We know how to take better care of ourselves than we give ourselves credit for, is the
Yeah.
lesson I keep on finding out over and over again in different
Hmm.
ways. It's so interesting that your problem, well, I don't know if it's a problem. Uh, it's interesting that you say that the extended exhales are your issue that
Hmm.
you want to work on because I have the opposite problem. Like breathing in is hard for me.
Wow.
Like I can exhale for minutes. Like I can exhale for so long and it feels very natural and good to me. But getting the air in is really difficult.
Wow. I am so glad that you said that because I never even would have thought that. Like I could inhale forever. I can take
See,
in
I'm the opposite.
so much air and then it's just gone. And then it's just gone. I just let it all out.
That
And
is
trying to
so fascinating.
trying to extend my exhale feels like I'm dying.
That's how I feel about breathing in. Like breathing, it feels like I'm drowning above water. Like I hate it. And it takes
That's
me a long time of breathing for that even to like start to go away, which is why breath work, like the two-part inhale
mhm.
and then the exhale, there's two things that made that really difficult for me. One, doing a two-part inhale felt like I was getting punched. Like there's so much
Mm.
tension in my torso and it was so difficult to do that even those little like sips of breath was hard. And
Mm.
then when I first started practicing it, I was doing it with um, guides that were more of the pushing kind, like
Mhm.
this rhythm, push through the resistance, keep going, white knuckle it, don't let it go, keep going, that thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any better, so that's what I was following along. And their rhythm was so difficult for me
Mhm.
because I could exhale for so long. And like with that breath, it was like a let it go and then like get right back to the active inhale was like
Mhm.
the what's the word I want? The emphasis was on getting in that inhale. And for me, it's always been easier to emphasize the exhale.
Whoa.
I'm getting better at breathing in, but it's still still a process. Um Yeah, it's better than it was with lots of practice, but it's what I struggle with most of the time. And if I, well, and unfortunately, I think, oh, I need to do more breath stuff when I'm dysregulated, but when I'm dysregulated is when it's the hardest to breathe in.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah,
I'm also really good at holding my breath.
yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of like why I hate breath work. Like I was also considering after that session that we did the other day,
Mhm,
that I was like, oh my God, this was my second favorite breathwork session. And
mhm.
I was like on my walk later and I was thinking about it and I was like, do I still hate breathwork?
Oh, yeah, good
And
question.
because I have historically just really hated it because I feel like I'm dying. I feel like I am not like getting enough air. Like it feels so uncomfortable to me, and
Yes.
I just hate that so much. But like it was like after I did it each time, I
Hmm.
felt a benefit.
Yep.
Um, but a lot of like what you described with what I think that you described before as like bro breath work.
Yeah, I had that thought, yeah, where it's just like it's very bro-like of the tough it out and the push
Yeah.
through, and it's like, do another rep, like that thing. And it was so funny that when I first met Elle, they echoed the same thing to me when they were describing the way that they approach breath work. They use the same like language, and I'm like, okay, yes, that. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
thankful that I got introduced to breath work, but I love that Elle talks about, some of its problematic ways
Yeah.
it made its way to the West, because I'm like, yeah, that's how I learned it, and that's why I like could understand and feel the benefits, but with that lens, I can't with the bros.
Yeah, I think it takes out that like intuitive part of it. It takes out that the bit
Mm-hmm.
of that, right? Like what we were saying earlier, like your body knows,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes that out when you're like, okay, here's the pace, keep up with the pace. But yeah, with Elle, like I fully felt that permission to just to let go of all of that,
Yes.
like whenever I felt like it, and to not like judge it, and just I, to let myself go at my own pace.
Mm-hmm.
And if I felt like I was dying, I could just stop, and that was okay too.
Yep.
Like, and so yeah, so now I'm considering that maybe I don't hate breath work. For such a long time it was that practice of like, the whole entire time I'm thinking in my head, like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? I hate
Right.
this. Like, when's it going to be done? I hope it's done
Mm-hmm.
soon. Um, and I didn't have that this time. It
Mm.
like it was more of like, okay, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. All right, I'm gonna breathe differently. Or like I would
Mm-hmm.
just start breathing differently. I wouldn't even really like think about it. And some of it I was wondering, like, okay, how much is left? Like, but it was more of like, how much of this can I handle?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And so, like, historically, like, having had those thoughts during this practice that's supposed to be like, okay, it's supposed to be like a self care practice. I'm like, I don't want to do self care practices where the whole entire time I'm like, when is this going to be over? I hate it. Like it, even if even if I'm getting benefits out of it afterwards, like I just, that doesn't feel nourishing and supportive.
Right.
And for a long while I was trying to then also to not judge myself for that, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I hate breath work, like it doesn't work for me. And I would hear so many people being like, you need breath work, like that means you need it, or like maybe you should work on, like, and I'm like, well, fuck, what if I just don't like it?
Yeah.
And now I'm coming into a place where I'm just like, oh, well, maybe I just didn't know that there was a way to practice it that felt more like nourishing and supportive.
Right.
It's interesting to have gone from like, I hate this thing,
Mm-hmm.
to now being like, okay, like, uh, all right, like I'm still on the fence, but like I'm more like, maybe I don't hate this.
I love that journey for you. And it also makes sense why you would hate it. I think for me, ooh, okay, sorry. I call them starburst thoughts, where
Hmm.
my mind kind of like explodes into little starbursts. And so then I have like seven paths that I need to like figure out. Okay, so what I was starting to say was that breathwork for me has been a journey in increasing my self trust that I can
Mm-hmm.
handle discomfort and be
Mm-hmm.
okay. And also growing my capacity for discomfort and being
Mm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, as I was saying that, I had this other underneath thought of like, oh, I wonder, because like I had the this is so uncomfortable. I feel like I'm dying. I don't like this. But I did kind of get the giddy tension release after effects. And I had one of the starburst thoughts I had was, oh, isn't that interesting? I think that feeling that uncomfortable was so familiar that I was okay with putting myself through it over and over and over again.
Huh.
Like it's a both and.
Mm-hmm.
Like I often have this thought of, why did I have to learn that lesson so hard? Like, why did it have to be that extreme, that intense, that dramatic to learn a lesson? And I think breathwork was a little bit like that for me at first, where it's like, oh, it didn't have to be that, oh, what's the word I want?
Do you have a
It didn't,
shouting bird over there?
yeah, that's my red-winged blackbird.
Oh my God, it literally sounds like it's like on the like sitting on your couch with you.
Yeah, oh yeah, Ingrid just going over. So
Sorry.
I have my balcony door cracked open, and the red-winged blackbird just came onto the balcony to scream. So
Nice. Thank you.
she, he. I'm gonna take a peek real quick. I think it's
Uh-huh.
he. Yeah, he.
Well,
He's normally the loudest one. He
he's got some
is
vocals on
basically
him.
in the room with me.
All right. I respect that. I think he's here to just further emphasize everything that we've been talking about and,
Yeah, the shouting, the
projecting
breath
your, yeah,
work,
yeah,
the taking up space with
yeah,
auditory projection.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I like that I'm finally getting to the lesson doesn't have to be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could do breath work and it just doesn't have to be that intense.
Yeah, I like that.
Which, paradoxically, and I think this is where the lesson is, makes it that much more profound.
Hmm. I I love that. I really like that. Um, when you were talking, it made me think of the window of tolerance,
Mm-hmm.
right? And expanding your capacity to
Yep.
experience discomfort and still be like, I can handle this. And I oh yeah. I think with like yesterday's kind of, I'm not sure if it was yesterday's like theme or if that's what it felt like to me, but just of being like, we're here, we're showing up with like all of us, all of our chaos and shit and joy
Yes.
and all of the things. And none of it is good or bad. It just is. We are where we are, and we're just going to practice with that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to try to get rid of it. We're not going to try to make more of it. We're just going to like be.
Yes.
And I think that is that like, okay, yeah, I'm experiencing the discomfort of this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm here doing it anyway, and I can do it and I can handle it. And I think for me, really, like what I got out of yesterday was that bit that I said at the end, where I felt like I could just move around. Like I didn't have to lay there still in a
Mm-hmm.
position, like stiff in a position.
Yeah.
And it really made me think of like ADHD, and where
Mm-hmm.
I historically have been like, no, I am not the hyper end of it, but
Oh yeah.
I am realizing more and more like how much I feel like I want and need to move, and
Same.
and how
Mm-hmm.
I've held that all inside, right? To look a certain way, right? To look like
Uh-huh.
a good quiet little girl who behaves.
Yes.
And so just in that session of being like, okay, my body feels like I need to move, or when she was like, you kick your legs all around if you feel like it, right? Or like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, okay, like I'm gonna do all of this and I'm gonna move all around. And then I caught the thing that happens next in my brain where it happens all the time during these, where
Yeah.
I'm sitting on any kind of like video call. But I am just like, I'm moving around in my chair the whole time. And I'm like, Bridget, you're moving around too much. Bridget, that's too distracting. Bridget, like, quit moving. Like all of those
Uh-huh.
kinds of thoughts come up. And so I noticed that come up. And I was like, no, I'm allowed to move. I was like, what if I need to move more? What if I just
Mm-hmm.
do it and give myself what I feel like I need in this moment and then see what happens then? What if I can
Uh-huh.
just move a lot and that's fine? And like I felt just like I was just like unlocking freedom,
Yes.
and that it was like this session too, like afterwards I didn't necessarily feel that like high or that euphoric feeling or like that I would typically feel after breath work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just kind of like thought of it as like, well, what if the experience is just like the experience? It's not necessarily that I have to feel a certain way afterwards.
Yeah,
It's
there's not
just
a
that,
goal.
yeah, like that I was here
Mm-hmm.
in community with everyone and like I felt that connection and it was just like that I felt the freedom and the experience that I got out of it in that moment. And like I didn't get the runner's high afterwards, but like maybe that's not the point. Like
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it was okay that it was just like I just experienced it and like that was okay. And that was like totally
Yes.
fantastic. Two thumbs up.
Yeah, I really liked when Elle started the session with there's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
Because I need to remind myself of that all the time because I am constantly trying to fix all the things, usually about myself. Which, what a terrible message to give yourself all the time that you need
Mm,
fixing. Like we were talking
mm-hmm.
about this morning, like why can't we just be? Like, I have a really hard time with that because I'm just like constantly striving. And I'm so tired of striving. I don't want to strive anymore. I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the breath work as an experience and not as a tool to get to a goal is
Mm-hmm.
really powerful because breath work's different every single time I do it. And that's another reason I really like practicing with Elle because I think the first time I ever practiced with them, they said something along the lines of, well, they were talking about the agency you have and the control you
Mm,
have. This is your practice to do with what you want. They're just holding the space and giving suggestions and guidance, but you get to choose
mm-hmm.
how you're going to take care of yourself in this time you set aside. And one of the things that they said is like, if that means you start breathing and you decide you need to nap for the next half hour, okay. And that was like revolutionary to me. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I showed up to a breath work session and you just said I can nap if that's what I need the whole time. And in fact, that is what I did. I did nap the first time I practiced with them. And I it was the first time that I did breath work not perfectly or whatever standard
Mhm.
I had, and I felt good after. Or I was like, oh, that it because like I napped in a way that felt, I guess I call it my in between, where you're aware of your body, but your brain is kind of doing some dreamy stuff.
Yeah.
And so that I did that for like, and I would like come out of it and like I would start the active breath again. And then like I would lose the breath and I don't remember when I did. And I would have like some kind of like weird dreamy sequence thing going on while I knew I was in my body and I could hear the music. And then
Mhm.
I kind of like slowly come back up and be like, oh yeah, I was doing something. But it wasn't a panic. It was just like a, oh yeah, that's right. I was doing something. And then like was able to kind of like, start again. And I did that the whole time. And that was the best I had felt in a long time.
Mm.
Isn't it wild that we could just be?
It
Just
is.
humans humaning.
Indeed. Indeed.